Welcome back to the Founder Content Studio podcast. Today's guest is COO of e-Bate, Adrian. He has a background in electrical engineering, and in this episode we talk about the fusion of technology and creativity, balancing commercial and creative perspectives, and the best way to do that from a manager's point of view. Adrian has a lot of insight on funding for startups, and he's very experienced in how the process goes, and he gives a lot of information for founders. He has a lot of experience in storytelling as a TEDx speaker, and we really dive into a lot of different topics around startups, funding, public speaking, and so on. So other than that, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. So how did you basically get into technology, Adrian? That's kind of where I want to begin with this. Where did your interest into technology start with?
Well, I guess it started from my training. So I was born in Bucharest, in Romania. I studied electronic engineering, which was a 5-year course in Romania. It was in a technical field. And I was captured, and my interest was captured by technology. A lot of the stuff that I was studying in university was around satellite imagery and the way you can detect things. That was part of my diploma. Then I did a short spell at CERN in Geneva, the Center for Nuclear Research. I was there for a few weeks, and that was extremely fascinating. I must say, you got a feeling that the world is being made there. Yes. And back in Bucharest, I set up my own company, which I guess for today's standards was a digital agency. So we were using technology to create more or less marketing experiences. But technology was very, very incipient at that time. Yes. So we were putting together wires, and we were not always sure that things will work. And you had to actually delve quite deeper into the technology to make it work. At the same time, I was appointed as a lecturer at the Academy of Theatre and Film. And I think that's where two of my Venn diagram areas came together, which is creativity and technology. Yeah. So I was teaching students in camera and film direction. I was teaching them about animation and how they can use computer software to animate, and what they can do with multimedia tools and all of that sort of stuff. I was teaching them there while at the same time we were discovering them too. Yes. So it was an interesting thing. And then I studied for a PhD in UK, and that was in computer graphics and data visualization applied medical, especially to the medical field. I found that sort of imagery, which, as you can see, it's a little bit of themes through my both training but also experience. So I guess that's where it started. I can point a few names which my technology started, which is e-Bate. It was the beginning of e-Bate, the editing suites. Yes, I think we had probably the first one available in Romania. We had it in the Academy of Theatre and Film. So I was learning how to use it and how to put it together and run it. And Targa True Vision, which was one of the first image boards and video boards available for PCs. And I loved it. But more than the technology, I love its applications. And I think especially for creative side, I'm not sure we'll come back to creativity, because I think creativity is not only focused on arts and artistic output. But at that time it was, and I thought it just gives the students and the artists another type of pen, yes, that they can use to express themselves. Yeah. And I found that fascinating. Interesting.
And then, so tell me then tell me a little bit more detail about the first company then, because I always find that the most interesting of all of people's endeavors.
What was that like? How old were you? Set the scene a little bit for me on that one. And also, how did you get your first ever customer? What did that process look like?
Well, I would like to say that it was through marketing, but it wasn't. It was more through network and connections and being referred to. Some of the customers were USAID and a chemical company called Sanamid, for which we're doing digital calendars and stuff like this. We learned doing it. Yes. There was no business training in university. There was no business training in school. We learned by doing it and by using a little bit of common sense. And what I learned very quickly is that if you serve the customers the way they like to be served, and even above that, you're going to keep them. Yeah, they will come back to you because you give them some sort of sense of comfort that you can produce for them what they need, what they want, and that you'll be there to support them if something goes wrong. So I learned that very quickly, but I learned it not reading books or anything like this, but just by trying and testing and looking what the others were doing. Yes. And remember that when I set up this little digital agency was before the big networks came into Romania. So that was exactly the sort of border between 89 when the revolution happened and Romania became a free country and all of that, and possibly a year or 2 years later when the McCann Ericssons of this world arrived. So we were a very sort of small fish, really. But we were punching quite hard because we had the network, we were local, we had the network. And, whatever we were producing was high quality and also innovative, new. People very often say, oh, can you do that? Oh, wow, that's very interesting. Yeah. And that sort of innovation factor has kept us going for a while.
Sorry, I think we're just freezing up a little bit there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now, yes. But you froze a little bit.
Yeah, it's don't worry, I can edit this part out, but I think there's a little bit of a weird connection going on. Let me just double check my connection side.
Mine should be all right. I've got quite a fast connection, so.
Yeah, maybe it's me. It's on the Dutch side. Yeah, it says it's okay, but still, I just keep missing I can hear every like 5 or 6 words, and then it just glitches out. And it's very strange. And then it's really hard to add on the conversation when I'm only hearing half of it, which is a little bit frustrating. But give me a second, and I'll see if I can change that. Gosh. The fun of technology. It's funny that we both work in technology, and it seems to be. I'm just going to blame the platform because that's it. It's always easier to blame the tool that you're using sometimes.
Well, it's either blame that or you blame the latency. So.
Yeah. Okay, that seems a little bit better. So tell me a little bit now on what you're currently doing. So I think when we last spoke, you were then involved with e-Bate. Is that still the case, or are you?
I'm the CEO of e-Bate. I'm the CEO of e-Bate. So I run their daily business, the operations. I make sure that the different departments work together and that they are aligned. And basically, the interfaces between them work. I deal mostly with problems. Yeah. So my role is to smooth out problems. That's what I have to do. Yes. But I think I come from an understanding that in order to make the technical operations work, you have to have exposure on the commercial ones, and you have to have some experience on commercial ones. And I've got some experience from the past. I was a CEO of an immersive technologies agency. My role at that time was a lot client-facing, marketing, sales type of stuff, closing deals. I think you need to understand that sort of commercial operations, because then you can align the technical ones to the commercial ones. And that's very important. Otherwise, you're going to produce something that either the clients don't want, or the clients don't like, or the price is not right, or your chain supply is not right, or, everything else. So I think that's very important. I'm also a true believer that a company is made by these people. You have to know how to deal with people, and you have to make sure that you understand what makes them tick. I think that there is a path in order to get there. So I started as a software developer. I loved it. I thought it was very creative. Then you have to go through management before you get to leadership, in my opinion. Because management will teach you how to plan, it will teach you how to make people work, and it will teach you, how to deliver in difficult conditions. And in order to get to leadership, you have to get some experience on a few other areas. A lot of it is soft skills. A lot of it is emotional intelligence, being able to deal with vulnerability, being able to show some vulnerability, create that sort of common ground where people actually open up to you. I think that's extremely important. Yeah? And it's not something that you get overnight. You have to work, you have to go through some situation where you've lost employees, you have to understand why, you have to go through the recruitment, you have to get the talent, you have to understand why the talent wants to work for you, or why they don't want to work for you. So it is a process, and it's a maturing process. And you can become a true leader when you learn how to know that, and you learn that actually your position there is to support the others. It's not to big you up. It's not to be, the front of everything. It's to support the others. Because if you support the others and they create something for you, you will be almost transported by the others, for them. It's a wave going.
Yeah.
So I think from that point of view, also the COO position, for me, it's a combination of other positions that I have had before. So I've been a CTO before, I've been a head of innovation. As I said, in the CEO position, I was doing quite a lot of marketing and sales. CEO has a role of bringing all of those together. But in order to do that efficiently, you have to know a little bit how they work. You have to have had some exposure on the challenges. I've got a lot of exposure on the technical side, so my background and everything else. But I think you need to have exposure of the other areas, because you have to make those work together. You have to make sure the communication between them is done at the same level, rather than one speaking here, one speaking there. Yeah, and they seem that they are just going like cars, parallel on the motorway. Yeah? So yeah. At the moment, I'm going back to your original stuff. I'm the CEO of this SaaS solution, Fintech solution.
Okay, and how do you currently align commercial goals with the strategy of the technology? So I always find there's always an intersection in companies, especially startups, where the engineers or the programmers have an idea of where they think they want to take the company as well, and then the commercial team also has sometimes a different view. I feel like sometimes the programmers and the engineers are building something different, as you mentioned earlier. How do you align those two different sectors within a company exactly? What's the best way of doing that?
Well, the best way is to hear what each side has to say, but saying that the commercial is the one that drives the output. Yeah. If the commercial operations are not clear and your understanding of the market is not clear, you can have the brightest idea. It won't fly. Now, startups go through different stages. And the first stage is just inwards, creating what they think it is something that, the market will want. Yeah. But then there is a stage where sometimes it's a shock. Well, we've created this, we put it in front of the customer, and guess what? There's no traction. Yeah. And why is no traction? Well, there's no traction because actually you haven't listened to the market, and you've created something that the market either doesn't want, or there is enough, or there are too many competitors. the variety of options is too large. You don't bring anything to it. So as in the life of a startup, as soon as possible, you have to go out there and understand what the market wants. And you have to build something that actually the market wants. So how do I align those? I go on client meetings. I listen to my CX team and my customer support team. I speak to the salespeople. I speak to the marketing people. While at the same time, I want to bring, and it's not only me because I've got a head of engineering and head of QA, but I want them to bring the teams with them. So the teams have to understand, the engineers have to understand why they are doing this. And the more you expose them to the client work, the more you expose them to what the clients need and want. And I used to bring engineers in some of the client calls, just to listen, learn, and understand. Because very quickly they will find a solution that's actually beautifully technically crafted, but has absolutely no commercial value. And you have to align those very well. So it's a continuum to me. It's a continuum, and everyone from the technology to the commercial stuff have to move on this continuum all of the time to try to understand, where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of startups probably have that problem, and it's always an interesting topic of conversation because I feel like the engineers always have an idea, the commercial team have an idea, but you do need somebody, one of the leaders of the company, to align that and get everybody pulling in the right direction.
A friend of mine used to say that ideas without implementation are hallucinations. Yes. And everyone has an idea, and guess what? Probably a lot of them are bad ideas. Yes. But you also have to treat ideas with respect. Yes. And then you have to actually filter them or give them a sort of quota, which is related to a few other areas where that idea will be valuable. Is that a commercial? Is that very commercially viable? Is a technology idea? Will it support a commercially viable application? So if you are not afraid to actually take every idea and discuss it until you understand very well if it's working or not, if you can do that and you create that sort of environment where people do not get affronted by the fact that you say, well, it doesn't work. It's a great idea, but it doesn't work. You have to create that sort of safe environment where everyone can bring their ideas forward because you want that, while at the same time they don't get completely put off when you say, well, you know what, in this case it doesn't work. Oh, right, well, I'll never come back with an idea. Well, you have to make sure that environment is safe, and they will come back with idea. They understand that actually the fact that didn't work in that case is not a reflection on themselves. It just, it didn't match what the market wants.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create that sort of safe space, yes, where both commercial and technology come together, and they understand that actually one without the other doesn't work. And I go back to my continuum.
Yeah. And then how about the commercial side then? So with a startup, I feel like it's normally two founders, normally two technical founders, and then they have to start finding people that are commercial-ish. Normally the first couple of hires aren't very good, and they can just get hold of any guy that they know who thinks can sell something, and they kind of bring him along for the ride. How do you go about building a commercial team, and what are some of the maybe lessons that you've learned along the way that are important?
Well, first of all, not every technical leader or technical founder is commercially disabled. Yes, there's a lot of commercial founders who are very good on that side, and they understand the so that side of the thinking is not always unticked. But very often they start with an idea and they start building it. Yes. I would say that I would encourage the creation of an MVP as soon as possible and take that MVP to the market and start learning, what the markets say about it. Yes. I would say that what you have to do is give yourself enough time to do that. By that, I mean, be funded enough to be able to have that sort of runway to do it. Otherwise, all your decisions will be very, very financially driven, because you'll have to make sure that your cloth is of a certain size, yes, and you can't move further from that. Which it's a good exercise sometimes, but you don't want to be always driven by the financial decisions, yes, because otherwise, again, you'll create something that maybe the market doesn't want. So, the other thing, you have to know exactly which market you want to go into, because I think that's very important. Also, on a commercial level, is very important, because one of the tactics that to me have always worked is, if you want a commercial person, go and get a person from that market, yes, who was doing already a commercial role, yes, and take someone and change them from a gatekeeper to a poacher. They will know the market. They will know inside the company how to get through procurement and through all sorts of areas, how to get to the how to get approvals for stuff, and that's very important. So I think those are three principles which, they are quite general. So, every company is specific, but generally start as early as possible by showing something, even if it's not ready. Don't fret the 90% of your time on 10% of the features and, that sort of last bit. Iterate as quickly as possible. One of the advantages of a startup is that they can pivot quite quickly. So be able to pivot. Get a commercial person as soon as possible from your industry, because they know the viability of those things. Yes. And sometimes your solution is great, but the way you're selling it is not right. It doesn't fit into the sort of business plan of a company. It doesn't fit in the way, their model works. Maybe they don't like annual licenses. Maybe they like monthly licenses. They want to de-risk things. All of that is stuff that you don't know. And as a technical person, maybe your role is not to know those things. Your role is actually to build something to the standards that a commercial or an outside commercial person says in terms of business, business viability. And make sure that you're funded. Make sure you're funded, because without that, as I said, you're going to start making decisions which are based purely on finance. And I think those lead to shortcomings to a development.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. The funding part, I agree entirely when it comes to, well, definitely tech companies, because it's very hard to bootstrap a tech company unless you're come from a very wealthy family or something like that, which not all of us have the blessing of.
And, a lot of people have that.
But yeah,
they've just friends and family and borrow money and all of that. There's a lot of people who are very driven, and I'm in full admiration of those people. But it's a hard slog. I'm not saying the funding is easy. Funding is pretty difficult too. But you have to try.
And talking about funding then, so what kind of experience do you have with startup funding? I'm guessing, well, actually, no, I know from our last conversation, you have been involved in a few different funding rounds. What were some of the do's and don'ts that you can remember? That, say, if there's a founder listening to this right now, so what are some of the do's and don'ts that you'd advise?
Don't show a hockey stick. Nobody believes in that. Yes. In terms of your revenues and everything else, you'd be surprised how many times that's shown. Yes. Don't underestimate investors. They've seen it. They want quite quickly to get to the point where show me how you'll make myself. How will I make money from your stuff? Right? if you are going to investors who are already on your board and they are prepared to put more money or do something like this, treat them with utmost respect. Yes, don't underestimate anything. Bring them with you. I've been on a lot of boards where I could see a clear chasm between the founders and their team and the investors or the people on the board. Yes, that doesn't help at all. Right? Make sure that you always bring them with you. Yes, on the journey. I think that's extremely important. Really be careful on the valuations that you put on the companies, because they can be very quickly, just like that, they can be destroyed by someone who's very astute and know the market and bring you stats and stuff like this. And the investors have access to all of those. They're very most of the investors I have met, they are very astute in those things. They understand the market, and try to get in what I call intelligent money. So funds that come with not just the money attached to them, the currency attached to them, but also something like network, maybe some capabilities, network not only in terms of the other possible funders that they know, but also market network. They might know all sorts of people that will open up your sales to. So get that sort of intelligent money. That's very important.
And then
those are a few
when
things.
people are, and when people are raising capital, how important do you think telling a good story is? Because I hear this very, 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 very often about having a good company story, having, telling a great story when you're pitching. Is that something that you would or wouldn't advise people to do?
I think the storytelling is always important. I think it's very important, as long as you do not lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, the someone who's giving you money wants to get more money out of you. Yes. That's unless they are very sort of strategic, very long-term investors. But even them, they want to have an output at some point. Yes. So don't let the story shadow that, completely overshadow that. Yes. But I think a story is very important. It's the power of the story. I always said that, and that comes to, at the end of the day, when you go in front of an investor, you're a keynote speaker. You can't lose their interest. You have to make sure that your stuff is short enough so they don't lose patience with it. But during that sort of time that you allocate to it, make sure you take them in the boat. Yeah, your storytelling is your boat, and otherwise they will drown. Yeah, and you have to keep them with you. Yes, you have to make sure that there is a very sort of smooth transition from one thing to another, keeping them in the flow all of the time. Yeah. And the other thing that I think is quite important, give some moments which are things that they don't expect. And that's I think it's valuable not only for investors and presentations, but also when you speak, speaker's notes and all of that. Some moments where they gasp. I didn't think about that. That's not what I was expecting. So keep things concise, but make sure they are not flat. Have those moments when you go up and down. I think that's important.
And you're talking about public speaking. That's something that you've done quite a fair bit of from looking through your history. That is something that I've actually done a little bit more of in the last couple of years, and something that I actually really dislike on a very high level, I think. But
Why?
mainly that's because because I always had a fear of, even at school, of speaking in public. And I think it was due to a confidence thing more than anything. But then as I've got older, I never put myself into those positions to speak in public. You know, you'd always be the one not to put your hand up to do it. But then over the last 3 years, I've kind of been thrusted into on stage out of nowhere because I'm the only English speaking person for maybe a Dutch company. And they're like, well, you speak English, you better go talk about the company. And I've definitely got better. But for people that struggle with public speaking, what are some of the key things that you've learned then in public speaking and preparation more than anything? Like, what are the things you've prepared when preparing a presentation and before you speak that could help somebody like me or somebody else that doesn't like it?
I think the key word there is preparation. So I have my stuff prepared a week in advance if I have to do a keynote. And during that week, I will just rehearse it over and over and over and over again until I'm completely bored with it. And until it becomes second nature.
Mm.
Because once it becomes second nature, you can start improvising. It's a little bit like music. Yeah, I play a little bit of piano. Yeah. Just learn it. The beginning is difficult. The beginning, you're just going to stumble on all sorts of things. Just learn it. And when you've started learning, and when you think that actually, I can't stand it anymore, yes, that's when you can start improvising. And I think another part, which is very interesting, sort of speaking slot and speaking a keynote or something like this, is improvisation. I never read what I have on my slides or anything like this. And I tend to improvise a little bit. Yes. But in order to do that, you have to know your stuff. You have to know it very well. And you have to know every possible angle and every possible question that you might be asked. I mean, if it's a keynote thing, you might not be asked, but you have to know all of this. Yes. And you have to combine what you're showing, yes, with what you're saying. And those things have to be complementary rather than one explaining what the others, or one, reading what you have on your slides. I think that's boring. Then there is you have to be a little bit of designer. You have to understand fonts, you have to understand images, you have to have a little bit of artistical thing, either that or give it to someone who can do that. There's a lot of companies that can do that. You have to have some anchors. You have to have some words, some phrases on which you anchor your ideas. That's how I very often remember things. Yes, I know that on everything I anchor to a certain concept, and then because I know that sort of concept, I can start improvising around it. Yeah, but I always have my anchors. Am I afraid? Yes, every time I go on a stage, I've got nerves. I'm nervous, and I've done keynotes after keynotes. I've done a TEDx at Morgan Stanley. I had to do that while showcasing a VR headset, which made it even more difficult because everything could have gone wrong. But you have to be bold with those things. Yeah. I had a HoloLens on it, but it was one of the first versions of the HoloLens. Yeah, so I didn't know exactly if things will run or not. And make sure that it's a story that you're saying. That story has to have a beginning where you capture the audience interest. It has to have a sort of culmination of your story, and it has to have an end. Now, where you put that climax is up to you. It could be at the end, it could be in the sort of middle, it could be towards the middle. That depends a little bit. But you have to organize your story. Yes. And between those things, each stuff has to have a hook with the other, so that the story actually is not fractured. flows really nicely. As I said, you have to put the people in a flow.
Yeah.
And in order to put them in a flow, there's lots of things that you have to get right. Timing, it's a good thing. The way you speak, it's a good thing. You can't speak flat like this because you're going to lose them immediately. You have to go up and down, what you're showing. Sometimes people use questions. So during their presentation, there are some questions. Or they get a friend of mine does an exercise at the beginning of something like this, yes. He's asking people to do something. That could put people in flow also. But it's important to get them in some sort of flow and to keep them there for the length of your presentation. I find conferences, lots of them, quite boring. It's just, one talk after another, and every talk in itself and what they're doing is probably very interesting and very advanced, but the presentation doesn't capture me, doesn't keep me there. And after the fifth one or the sixth one, you're a bit tired of them. Yeah, that's too much to take.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few suggestions.
Yeah. I actually remember. I actually remember doing a presentation probably 2 years ago, and it was a presentation that was made for me to do. And if I can ever recommend anybody not to do that, it would be with the highest degree of don't do that.
Yes, you can't do that. It has to be yours. That's another thing that's actually very important. You have to be yourself. Yes. In during this presentation, you have to show something that it's you in it. Yes. That personality has to shine through. Yes. Because that's what people will detect and like about it. So yeah, copying what the others have done, or just get someone else to do a presentation. I mean, honestly, I had to a few times where I had to do that, but those were not the successful ones.
Yeah, that was the worst I'd ever felt before, during, and after a presentation. Definitely, It was just not knowing enough.
Sorry,
no,
go ahead. Sometimes don't forget that the way you perceived it is different from the way the public has perceived it. Yes. And very often that goes in the way that you think, well, actually, it wasn't very successful. Well, actually, people have enjoyed it. Yes. So that can happen very often.
Yeah, I definitely had that feeling afterwards where I was like, oh man, that sucked, like, really bad. I remember just having that feeling afterwards, just thinking, oh man, was that as bad as I thought it was? But then after the event, everyone's, oh, I really liked your talk. And I was thinking, man, I winged that so badly. Like, I didn't really feel like I knew the content that I was talking about too much. It was very last minute. So yeah, that is a big no-no. And since then, preparation for me has also been key. I think, the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel. And if you spend 10 hours preparing, you'll all of a sudden remember those butterfly feelings are a little bit less than they were when you've just done 30 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. As I said, if you get to the point where actually you're sick and tired of it, then you can start going on a stage and presenting it. Yes. So I think that's a good rule, John.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the current company then. What is the I checked it out a little bit. So you're around 15 to 20 people at the moment. How long has the company been going for? Oh, is it?
We're around 35, 40 people. The company has gone for around 5 years now. The first 3 to 4 years were sort of developing the product. It has actually started from as an idea in another company, which was a bespoke IT company. And they realized that one of the main requests was for this sort of type of application. So there was a little bit of market fit there. I think the company has a good market fit, product market fit. It's a fintech. It deals with rebate management which doesn't sound like a sexy thing, but the numbers stack up quite nicely in the sense that I think it was, I don't know if it's just a recent number, but something like 500 million in rebate management is completely ignored, because people don't track it.
Yeah.
It's an automatic solution, SaaS-based solution for full control of your rebate management if you deal with suppliers or if you deal with customers. It does, you can do a lot of forecasting with it. You can also do a lot of understanding of what are your best scenarios. It's based on a very accurate calculation engines, and some of the rebates can be very complex. So we deal with very complex rebates. Yes, we can deal with a lot of data. Most of our clients are big clients, where actually rebates are quite a big percentage of their revenues. And yeah, what I like about it, it has a very, very good product market fit. One side that you need to do is,
does it work globally?
Yes, right. So we've got clients in Australia, America, obviously UK. So it does work globally. Yes. So yes, product market fit. It's very good, and while you'd think that it's quite a departure from some of the previous companies I worked for, which were, you could say, more creative. I think that actually creativity can be found everywhere. The way coders are very creative, developers are extremely creative. Everything can be creative. At the end of the day, the creativity is about, the way you link dots. Yes, in a way that it's not the obvious way. So the ability to actually connect things, concepts, ideas, in a way that is not the obvious path. And you can apply that in everything. And so, yeah, I quite enjoyed.
I think it being not such a sexy industry must be quite hard on the marketing front, because most of the companies I've been involved in are kind of sexy industries, I guess. So
me too in the past.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And how is that then on the marketing side of things? When it is a not so sexy industry, how do you jazz that up a little bit? And how does that sort of go?
Well, I mean, look, I love marketing, but I'm extremely happy that I'm not a marketer in this world. Yes, because I think it's increasingly difficult in every field, not only in the sexy ones, but in the non-sexy and sexy ones. Yes, to capture what is marketing. Marketing, it's about getting people's attention and telling them about your whatever you're selling, product, service, whatever it is. And that's that fight for their attention, which is now divided into hundreds of little areas, while in the past maybe there were tens or whatever, makes marketing more and more difficult. But what I believe very strongly, and I have worked with very good marketeers, yes, what I believe very strongly, that part of the market that helps you with everything is the way you position your brand. So your brand, and making your brand known to the world through whatever means you can, educational things, or anything from design to what do you stand for? Yeah. And what do you stand for is not only what you stand for in relation to your product, but what do you stand for in terms of relation to your culture, relation to your people, relation to the environment, relation to the social aspect of things, relation to your governance, relation to how you raise money. Yes. Who are your investors? How do you treat them? All of that sort of stuff creates your brand. Yeah. And I think the stronger the brand you have, the easier it is to open doors and sell and everything else, because brands create trust. Yeah? And selling is based on trust. Yeah? We can talk about B2B sellers. We are B2B, or B2B2C, or B2C, whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's a contract between two people. Yeah, it's a human to human thing. Yes, and human to human thing is based on trust. Yeah, and powerful brands inspire trust, and very often powerful brands are probably not necessarily their products are not necessarily the best ones. Yes, but they do inspire that sort of trust, and people are attracted to that trust. So, I'm not an expert in marketing. I have worked with good marketeers. I have seen and understand, what are the sort of new things in marketing. But one stuff that I learned from others, and I think it's very important, is your brand and how you build your brand. And that's something that we are trying to do.
Let's talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Just let's talk a little bit about management then, because that's something that I'm currently in as well. So it's interesting for me. And what do you think is the, I guess managing different people is different. Obviously, managing a software engineer is completely different, to managing a salesperson. Let's talk about the technical side of things, because I feel like engineers sometimes aren't the easiest people to manage.
Nice
Yeah, true. Okay, here's one for you. In your experience, who's harder to manage, commercial teams or tech teams?
I don't think it's a question that I can answer, because I haven't led sales team as a director of sales or anything like this. I don't think that. I think that each one has its. I think at the end of the day, you're managing people, no matter what is their role. And in order to manage people, I think there are some things which are very sort of general. Yeah. You have to understand, first of all, you have to very well understand their capabilities. You have to understand their propensity to learn. You have to take a decision to understand if their capabilities can be trained to the level that you want, or you think that that person will never be able to get to that sort of position. And then you have to take a decision. They might continue to work or not. They have to trust you. Yeah. And they have to trust that you always have their backs. Yeah. I believe in something called radical candor. Yeah. I believe that you have to create with your people a space which is a safe space where they can express themselves freely, as long as what they do is constructive. It doesn't insult anyone. Yes. And the people whom they are talking to are richer after that sort of conversation. Yes. They can go and they say, oh, well, I haven't thought about that. Maybe she or he or them, they're right. Yeah. I think you have to create that. But I think the important stuff is you are not the most important person. They are the most important person. Your role as a manager, and actually your role more than a manager, the leader, is to support them. Yeah. Your role is to make sure that actually after they've been in touch with you, they are richer. They have something that they say, well, actually, I'm going to go and do that. Yes. I tend to ask a lot from people. I think I ask enough the same from myself. I think that people have to have a very clear definition of what are their goals and the company's goals and how they align that to the company goals. Yes. And you have to be transparent. You have to be very transparent. Yes. I think that transparency is extremely important. Yeah. Sorry, did you hear something in the background? It was my son with his music.
Nice. It's okay.
No, it's not. So I'm not sure if salespeople are more difficult to manage than technical people. Yes, technical, as long as you understand what makes them tick. Yes, and what makes them tick is different, obviously, across the company. Yes, I've worked with creative people a lot. I work with people who are engineers. I work with people who are at the border between creativity and engineering. Obviously, I have worked with marketeers and salespeople also. They have different approach to things, but you have to understand that approach. And if you don't understand that approach, then you don't find that sort of path of communication, which is, you have to always, it's a little bit like the conflict. I'm not saying that you be in conflict with your people, but the best way to approach anything is to find a common path, the common background. Yes. And then if you find that, you can start building. Yes. And very often, a relationship with an employee can be conflictual, or it could be perceived as conflictual, because at the end of the day, you want something, they want something else. Those things might not align. How do we make those things align? Yes. And that's a little bit of give and take from each side. And if you can build on that, I think you can build a good relationship with those people, no matter what role is their role in the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. The two things that stood out for me there were the transparency part and the giving somebody a bit of direction, a goal after they've spoken to you. So I know after speaking to a very good manager, after the conversation, you're right, you feel enriched. You feel like, okay, I've got something to work towards now. And if only people could inject that into their people more often, they would have much more productive people. And the transparency part as well, just not BSing people about what's going on and what you expect
There's a lot
of
of
them.
that,
Be clear.
unfortunately. I think there's a lot of that. I mean, the other thing that I would say it's proven to be quite useful. Obviously, you can do it at a certain scale. Be personal with people. Find out something that they are needing, or you think that they will benefit from, which is not the same for everyone else. Yes. Give them advice on something that they find interesting, or it's something personal. Find a suggestion for a book for them, or make sure, we're coming back to marketing. Good marketing is marketing that, nowadays they all talk about personalization. Yes. It's a very wide and very general term, but I think there is a bit of personalization you have to do in your relationship if you're a manager of someone, because then they think, well, actually, this is for me. It's not for everyone. A sort of blanket approach. This is for me, and you'll be surprised that that creates a bond, a certain trust. And I think that's something that has worked for me in the past.
Yeah. I've also noticed working with creative people is a very different style to maybe more commercial people. I think that one thing I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed as well, that commercial people good commercial people are normally very focused on things happening quickly, because they know in a startup or a scale up, if things don't happen quickly, sometimes that's when things fall apart. But I think trying to encourage creative people to act quickly is very much against their personality types oftentimes, because they often are not of the opinion, but creative things take time, right? And I feel like that commercial people feel that they take too long to do things. Have you got an opinion on that, or have you observed that?
I think their outputs are different, and the outputs they are looking for are different. Yes. The way they get there is very different. Generally, for a commercial person, at least in my experience, it's a very sort of quite a linear stuff. They know how to get from A to B to C. They're very focused on that. They should be very focused on that. Very often, commercial people are driven either by some sort of KPIs related to the revenue of the company, but also some commission that they make out of that. Creative people, you have to give them the space. Yeah, You have to give them that sort of space. They work on a mesh that moves all of the time. Boundaries are very sort of flowing, but that's the amazing things. When you give them that sort of independence and ability to move in that sort of space that they create themselves, they come up with some amazing things. Yes, and you have to respect that. And sometimes it's difficult because companies are under pressure. Clients do ask for deadlines. Sometimes, with a work with a creative person, if you allow them 10 years, they will create the most amazing things, but you don't have those 10 years. You have a week or a day or whatever it is. Yes. So you have to put a little bit of time boundaries, while at the same time try to make sure that they understand why then those are there and they don't feel frustrated by those. And some of them do, Again, I think the best way to do that sort of stuff is if you've done it yourself, somehow, or at least you've got some exposure to the challenges of that. You also have to have a mind that can switch from different mindsets, or at least tries to understand different mindsets. Yes, so you don't speak with a commercial person in the same way that you speak to the technical ones, the same way you speak with a creative one. You have to be very adaptable, very, very adaptable.
Yeah.
And not only in you have to listen a lot. You have to listen. I think that's another skill that we tend to lose. It's a muscle that we don't train enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. In a world that is filled with, as we talked about in the marketing, getting people's attention, the art of listening has also kind of been forgotten, and everyone's so busy trying to be loud that we've also
Absolutely.
forgotten how to listen. And yeah, that's a great point. And whenever I think of a great conversation, or if I think of whenever I feel like I've been understood by somebody, if I'm complaining or if I've got like a problem in my life, the best antidote that anybody has ever given me is just an ear. That's how I feel it's always been.
There's a difference between hearing and listening, and especially listening with intent. Yes. And that's the most difficult one, because we're under pressure of time. We are under pressure of our own mind that constantly thinks about the next stuff. So I'm talking to you, you're talking to me. I'm actually thinking about the next stuff that I will say. And during that sort of process, I lose more or less 60% of what you're saying. So listening to intent is something that needs to be trained, and can train through meditation, you can train through all sorts of ways. But I think it's the people whom I always felt that got my message were the people who actually spend their time listening with intent. What I have to say, they didn't have an opinion immediately.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the greatest things that I learned from selling something, was actually listening to the customer. That was one of my first sales manager's best pieces of advice. He always told me, listen to what the customer has to say, and then repeat it back to them better than they can articulate it themselves. And then they will feel more understood.
Yes. That again will build a sort of trust, because they think, oh, hold on, this guy actually heard what I was saying, understood what I was saying.
Yeah.
And now is prepared to actually expose what I was saying in a way that I wasn't able to, but actually it completely fits with what I wanted to say. Suddenly something clicked.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Adrian. Well, we're a little bit pressed on time after our technical issues earlier on, but I like to end the podcast with just basically saying thank you for your time, because you you could have been anywhere for the last hour, and you've for some reason chosen to speak to me, which still bewilders me sometimes when I speak to people. But thank you very much for your time. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing, and the companies you're involved in, and tell us a little bit more?
So LinkedIn is probably where they can find my profile. That's they will see. I'm also helping a few companies, apart from the company that, well, I'm fully dedicated to the company I'm working for, but I keep in touch with some companies that I used to work with before I'm on their board, or still keeping a sort of keen interest on what they're doing. You'll see my LinkedIn profile. So yeah, for the time being, I do some stuff on whatever it's called now, X, I guess, Twitter before. but not much. I use it more of a search engine than anything else. So yeah, if you really want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn profile is probably the best.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. And
thank you very much.
I hope we speak again soon.
Questions.
Thank you.
Bye.